So often, ReCore feels close to greatness. The platforming offers a fantastic degree of control, allowing you to perform death-defying stunts with relative ease. While the combat is fast, satisfying, and intense as you rack up high combos that boost overall damage. It's heartbreaking then that ReCore's shortcomings can be so disruptive. A horrendous endgame, bland world, and many other annoyances take away from an otherwise exciting journey. There's a certain affable, if somewhat basic quality present in ReCore's characters. You play as Jewel, a plucky survivor living in the desert world of Far Eden. Accompanying her is a small handful of friendly robots, such as Mac, a faithful canine companion, and Seth, an agile if skittish spider bot. It seems like a good-natured ensemble primed for adventure, but ReCore never really provides enough development or details for players to fully invest in its world, and there are only a precious few interactions. Everything essentially boils down to you having to stop evil machines from taking over the planet. It's not necessary for an action-adventure game to have a grand story, but ReCore makes it so obvious that that's what it's shooting for, and so obvious that it doesn't have the capacity to reach it.
He did something to the core bots.
Despite an underwhelming narrative, many of the mechanics and systems are well thought out and finely tuned. It's difficult to overemphasize just how good jumping and dashing feel. Jewel's jump goes just high enough and she hangs in the air just long enough that it's easy to get exactly where you want to go. If there's a rock formation or metal structure to climb, you can likely find creative ways of getting there. The world and dungeon design do an excellent job of fostering that creativity. ReCore tends to point you in a general direction, and then it's up to you to figure out the details. Traversal also evolves in several interesting ways. Seth, the spider bot, can carry you along metal tracks, clambering along at a breakneck pace, and flinging you up into the air upon reaching the end. It's both ridiculous and thrilling, feeling somewhat akin to a slot car zipping along a predetermined path. The ability allows Jewel to reach previously inaccessible locations, as nearly all abilities do in ReCore, offering a Metroid-esque feeling of gratification upon conquering an entire area. Sometimes in games where platforming is so prevalent, combat can be simple or tedious. Not so in ReCore. The game asks players to make minute-to-minute decisions that ensure even the most basic fights remain interesting. Enemies are color-coded, and to hurt them efficiently, you need to shoot matching colored lasers. As you shave off chunks of health from evil bots, you build up a combo. The higher the combo, the more damage is multiplied. Since smaller or lower-level enemies die much more quickly, a useful strategy is to kill them first and rack up the multiplier before taking on more dangerous threats. Of course, that's not the only thing to consider. Certain enemies have more debilitating attacks than others, so eliminating them first is top priority. It's a lot to consider during a fight, but never so much that it becomes overwhelming. There's also the decision of whether to blow up a robot or steal its core. Blowing them up earns parts necessary to complete blueprints for your buddies, making them stronger and sturdier. Meanwhile, cores act almost like skill or attribute points, directly raising the attack, defense, and energy of you and your companions. These cores also usually take a fair amount of effort to extract, requiring a sort of tug-of-war minigame where you're asked to pull back on the analog stick at the right time in order to wrestle the orb out. It leaves you very vulnerable to attack, so deciding when and where to pull a core can mean the difference between life and death, making it a valuable tactical decision. While moving and blasting your way through the world is exciting, the world itself is rather dull. The vast stretches of desert and futuristic structures look almost identical from one area to the next. If you were to take a section of ReCore and stick it in some other post-apocalyptic or dystopian sci-fi game, it likely wouldn't look that out of place. We never found ourselves in awe of what was around us. In that sense, the world is nothing more than a means to an end, stitching together the various dungeons and providing a place to pick up collectibles and upgrades. It doesn't help that ReCore is rough from a technical perspective as well. The game looks like it belongs to the last generation of consoles, with low-quality textures as well as annoyingly long load times on Xbox One. Easily the most egregious sin, however, is the structure, particularly toward the end. Throughout the story, ReCore asks you to gather a certain amount of prismatic cores before unlocking the next dungeon. These cores can be acquired by finding them in the world or completing various side dungeons. It can be slightly frustrating to stop what you're doing just to grab a few more cores, but it's not too bad since the amount needed generally isn't all that much. Yet at the very end of the game, you're suddenly required to grab more than twice the amount of cores you currently have if you've only been collecting what's necessary to move forward. The entire game comes to a screeching halt, resulting in blatant padding that feels similar to the infamous Triforce quest in Wind Waker. It turns what would otherwise be fun optional activities into painfully tedious chores. For all of its missteps, it's hard to get too angry at ReCore. The platforming and combat are so good that it's hard not wishing a better game surrounded them. For those with a fair amount of patience, it's worth playing just to see the strongest aspects. For everyone else, it's best to just shake your head, move on, and wonder what could have been. Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to see our other videos and consider becoming a patron to help us make more.